Hey guys, today we're diving into another truly horrifying case. If you want to support my channel, make sure to subscribe and stay active. It really helps me out. I'd be super grateful for that. Let's get started. A loving mother of two, a dedicated nurse who saved lives every night. She sent one final text message to her lover at 10:58 p.m. and then she vanished into thin air. No body, no weapon, no crime scene, just a pair of broken glasses. A husband with a dark secret, and screams that shattered the silence of a quiet French village. Cedric Jubler swore his wife walked out the door and never came back, but the evidence told a different story. A story of jealousy, rage, and what prosecutors called the perfect murder. 5 years later, a courtroom would be forced to answer an impossible question. Can you convict a man of murder when the victim has never been found? The answer would shock an entire nation and leave one haunting mystery unsolved. Whereas Delphine Jubler was 33 years old, and her life revolved around two things: her children and her calling. As a nurse working night shifts in the Tarn region of southern France, Delphine spent her evenings caring for the sick and vulnerable. Her colleagues described her as compassionate, the kind of person who remembered every patient's name and made them feel seen during their darkest hours. She had chosen a profession that demanded sacrifice, and she gave everything she had without complaint. But behind the scrubs and the warm smile, Delphine was drowning in a marriage that had turned toxic. She lived in Cagnes-les-Mines, a small village where everyone knew everyone else's business, where secrets were currency and gossip spread faster than wildfire. Her home should have been a sanctuary. Instead, it had become a prison. Her husband, Cedric Jubler, was 38 years old and worked as a plasterer and painter. On the surface, they seemed like any other couple raising two young children in a quiet community. But the cracks in their relationship had been growing for years, and by late 2020, those cracks had become chasms impossible to ignore. Delphine wanted out. She had made the decision to leave, to file for separation, to start a new chapter away from the man who had slowly suffocated every bit of joy from her life. Cedric was not the kind of man who handled rejection well. Those who knew him described a person trapped in perpetual adolescence, impulsive and immature, someone who drifted from job to job and blamed the world for his failures. He was a habitual cannabis user, often high when he should have been present for his family. Friends and neighbors painted a picture of a man who contributed little to the household, who left Delphine to manage the children, the bills, and the endless responsibilities of daily life while he coasted through on minimum effort. But there was something darker lurking beneath the surface of Cedric's lazy exterior. He had a temper. Witnesses would later testify about his violence, not just toward Delphine, but toward their own children. He believed fear was a parenting tool, one stating that children needed to be afraid of their parents, or else you would get eaten alive. It was a chilling philosophy that revealed the kind of man he truly was: control through intimidation, power through fear. Delphine had endured years of this treatment. But something shifted in the months leading up to December 2020. She had started talking to someone online, a man who showed her kindness and attention, things that had been absent from her marriage for far too long. His name would later be revealed as Donat Jean Maquet, though many would simply refer to him as Jean. What began as conversation evolved into an emotional affair, and eventually, something more. For Delphine, this relationship represented hope, a reminder that she deserved better, that life could be different. She confided in Jean about her plans to leave Cedric, about her fears and her dreams for the future. The messages between them grew more frequent, more intimate. She was planning her escape, brick by brick, message by message. Cedric knew, of course he knew. In a marriage that had deteriorated to the point of toxicity, secrets are hard to keep. He had discovered the affair, and the jealousy consumed him like poison. This was a man who needed control, who needed Delphine to remain within his grasp, and the thought of her leaving, of her choosing someone else, shattered whatever fragile stability he had left. In the weeks before her disappearance, Cedric's behavior became increasingly erratic and threatening. He made comments that should have been taken as warning signs, but were dismissed as empty words spoken in anger. He told people he would kill her. He said he would hide her body where no one would ever find her. Those close to him, including his own mother, would later recall these statements with horror, realizing they had witnessed the blueprint of a murder being drawn right before their eyes. Delphine took steps to protect herself financially. On the very day she would disappear, she cut off Cedric's access to their joint bank accounts. It was a necessary move, but it was also an act of war in Cedric's eyes. The control he had maintained for so long was slipping through his fingers, and desperation was turning into something far more dangerous. The timing was textbook. Experts in domestic violence know that the most dangerous moment in an abusive relationship is when the victim decides to leave. That is when jealousy transforms into rage, when control becomes violence, when threats become action. Delphine Jubiler was living in that precise moment of maximum danger, and everyone around her was about to discover just how deadly that moment could be. December 15, 2020. France was navigating the complexities of a global pandemic. A nationwide curfew had been implemented, requiring everyone to stay indoors between 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. The country had just emerged from a strict lockdown the day before, but the curfew remained in effect. This detail would become crucial, because it meant that anyone moving around outside during the night would be breaking the law and potentially drawing attention. That evening, Delphine returned home from her shift at the hospital. She spent time with her children, the moments of normalcy that every parent cherishes. Her eldest son, Louis, was 6 years old. He would later provide testimony that would chill investigators to their core. But on that night, he was just a boy watching television with his mother, unaware that he was living through the last hours of her life. Cedric claimed he went to bed around 10:30 p.m., leaving Delphine and Louis to finish their show. The timeline that followed would be dissected by investigators, analyzed by lawyers, and debated by a jury trying to piece together the truth from fragments of memory and digital footprints. At 10:55 p.m., Louis went to bed. 3 minutes later, at 10:58 p.m., Delphine sent her final text message to Jean, her lover. It was a normal message. Nothing that suggested fear or distress, just a woman reaching out to someone who made her feel alive. And then, silence. Delphine Jubiler would never send another message. She would never make another phone call. She would never hug her children again. Something happened in that house after 10:58 p.m., something that would remain hidden in shadow and speculation, something that would haunt everyone who tried to uncover the truth. The clock was ticking toward midnight, and in that quiet French village, a family was about to be destroyed forever. At approximately 11:07 p.m., neighbors heard something that made their blood run cold. Screams, loud, piercing screams of fear that cut through the quiet night. The sounds came from the direction of the Jubiler house, desperate cries that spoke of terror and pain. 2 separate neighbors would later testify that they heard these screams, though the exact timing would become a point of fierce debate during the trial. Were the screams at 11:07 or earlier? Did they coincide with Louis going to bed, or did they happen after Delphine sent her final message? The timeline mattered because it could corroborate or destroy the theory that something violent happened in that window of time. Inside the house, 6-year-old Louis had heard something too. He would later tell investigators that he heard his parents arguing. He saw them near the Christmas tree, decorated with lights and ornaments that now seemed obscenely cheerful against the backdrop of violence. He witnessed a physical altercation, his mother and father in a confrontation that no child should ever see. The details were fragmented, the way a child's memory often is when processing trauma, but the core truth remained. Something terrible happened that night, and Louis had been close enough to hear it. What happened in those crucial minutes after 10:58 p.m.? The prosecution would build a theory based on rage and jealousy. Cedric, confronting Delphine about the affair, about her plans to leave, about the bank accounts she had just locked him out of. An argument escalating from words to physical violence, a pair of glasses being knocked from her face, shattering on impact. And then, in a moment of uncontrolled fury, Cedric strangling his wife until her screams stopped and her body went limp. But there was no body, no blood spatter on the walls, no weapon left behind. If Cedric Jubiler had murdered his wife in that house, he had also managed to erase almost every trace of the crime. Almost, but not quite, because the devil lives in the details. And there were details that didn't add up, no matter how hard Cedric tried to make them fit his narrative. At 11:53 p.m., while Delphine lay dead or dying, Cedric logged into a dating site on his phone. Think about that for a moment. A man who claimed to love his wife, who would soon report her missing in a panic, was browsing potential hookups less than an hour after she supposedly walked out the door. It was a digital fingerprint that revealed his true state of mind. He wasn't worried. He wasn't concerned. He was already moving on because he knew she wasn't coming back. The hours between midnight and 4 a.m. remained shrouded in mystery. Cedric's phone went silent, which was unusual for him. He typically kept his phone on throughout the night, but during this critical window, his device was powered off or placed in airplane mode, creating a convenient gap in the digital trail that investigators desperately wanted to follow. What was he doing during those hours? The prosecution believed he was disposing of Delphine's body, transporting her remains to a location where they would never be found. At 3:45 a.m., Cedric claimed he woke up and noticed Delphine was absent from their bed. 8 minutes later, at 3:53 a.m., his phone suddenly reactivated. The timing was suspicious. Why would his phone turn back on at that exact moment? And why would it take him another 16 minutes to call for help if he was genuinely concerned about his missing wife? At 4:09 a.m., Cedric Jubiler called the gendarmerie, the local police. He reported that his wife had disappeared, that she must have gone out for a walk and hadn't returned. It was a story that made no sense from the very beginning. Delphine was a responsible mother who would never abandon her sleeping children. She had worked the next day. Her car was still in the driveway. Her purse, her identification, her bank cards, everything was still in the house. The only thing missing was Delphine herself. When officers arrived at 4:50 a.m., they began documenting the scene. And that's when the inconsistencies started piling up like evidence at a crime scene. Delphine's glasses were found broken, not just removed, but shattered, as if they had been struck with force or knocked off during a struggle. Cedric and Louis both confirmed she had been wearing those glasses the night before. They weren't broken when Louis went to bed. So when did they break, and how? Forensic experts would later examine the glasses and determine that the damage was consistent with a violent impact, a punch to the face, an object thrown with force, the kind of breakage that happens during an assault, not from accidentally dropping them on the floor. Those broken glasses became a silent witness to violence, a piece of physical evidence that contradicted Cedric's calm story about his wife simply walking out the door. Then there was the car. Delphine's Peugeot 207 was parked facing the opposite direction from her normal habit. She always parked a certain way, a small detail that people who park in the same spot every day develop as muscle memory. But on the morning of December 16th, her car was facing the wrong way. Someone had moved it during the night. The obvious theory was that Cedric had used the vehicle to transport Delphine's body. He drove somewhere, disposed of her remains, and returned the car, parking it in a rush without thinking about which direction it normally faced. But when investigators tore that car apart, looking for evidence, they found nothing. No blood, no hair, no fibers, no mud on the tires that would indicate a drive to a remote location. No moisture that would be expected if the car had been driven through the rain that fell that night. The car was clean, almost suspiciously clean, and it raised more questions than it answered. Some witnesses claimed Cedric had been seen washing blankets and sheets in the early morning hours, right after calling the police. A man who never did housework suddenly doing laundry at 4 a.m. while his wife was missing. It reeked of guilt, of someone trying to eliminate evidence, but this detail would become heavily contested. The defense argued it was complete fabrication. The police found the duvet dry that same afternoon, that no washing had taken place. Forensic tests on the washing machine and the bedding found no traces of blood, no hemoglobin, nothing to suggest a crime scene cleanup. The investigation expanded rapidly. Search teams combed the surrounding area. Volunteers joined the effort, and Delphine's face appeared on missing person posters throughout the region. But Cedric's behavior during this time struck investigators as deeply wrong. He showed no interest in the search efforts. He made jokes about Delphine's friends who were desperately trying to find her. He complained to journalists that everyone was focused on Delphine and nobody cared about him. It was narcissism on full display, a complete lack of empathy that made even casual observers suspicious. The lead investigator, Major Bernard Lorvelic, became convinced early on that Cedric was responsible. Every piece of evidence, every strange behavior, every inconsistency pointed back to the husband, but proving it would be another matter entirely. In France, you can be convicted of murder without a body, but it requires building a case from circumstantial evidence so compelling that a jury has no reasonable doubt. They would need to assemble what French law calls a bundle of clues, each thread woven together to create a rope strong enough to hang a conviction on. Delphine's phone records showed that her device never left the house. Despite Cedric's claims that she walked out the door, her phone remained stationary, pinging off the same cell tower all night. There were mysterious activations at 7 minutes past midnight, 11 minutes past midnight, 1:33 a.m., and 6:52 a.m. Someone was interacting with that phone, but it wasn't Delphine. The most logical explanation was that Cedric was checking her messages, monitoring her communications with Jean, feeding his jealousy even as her body lay hidden somewhere only he knew. Then came the confessions, not from Cedric directly, but from people he had spoken to during moments of weakness or arrogance. His own mother, Nadine Jubiler, came forward with devastating testimony. Weeks before Delphine disappeared, Cedric had told her he would kill his wife and hide her body where no one would ever find her. A mother testifying against her own son. The weight of that testimony was crushing. Ex-girlfriends emerged with their own stories. One claimed Cedric had confessed to strangling Delphine during a prison visit. Another said he told her he had buried the body in a burned-down farm, though he later dismissed it as a joke. Fellow inmates reported that Cedric bragged about committing the perfect crime. And perhaps most chilling of all, the children's nanny testified that Cedric had once compared himself to Jonathan Develle, another French man who murdered his wife, saying he would have done it better, that his victim would never be found. These weren't just rumors or speculation. These were statements made by the accused himself, moments when his mask slipped and the truth leaked out. But were they enough? Could a man be convicted on confessions made to ex-lovers and prison mates, on broken glasses and suspicious phone activity, on a timeline that suggested guilt but couldn't prove it beyond all doubt? The investigation had reached a critical point, and prosecutors had to make a decision. Take this case to trial despite having no body, no weapon, and no definitive crime scene, or let Cedric Jubiler walk free. They chose to fight. The evidence against Cedric Jubiler was a puzzle with missing pieces. Investigators knew that solving this case would require convincing a jury that the pieces they did have formed a picture clear enough to erase all reasonable doubt. It wouldn't be easy. The French legal system operates on the principle of intimate conviction, where jurors and judges must be personally convinced of guilt beyond uncertainty. But how do you convince anyone when the central piece of evidence, the victim's body, has never been found? The prosecution built their case on what they called a bundle of clues. Each individual piece might seem insignificant on its own, but woven together, they created a tapestry that told a story of premeditated murder and calculated disposal. There were the broken glasses, shattered during a violent struggle. There were the screams neighbors heard at 11:07 p.m., desperate cries of fear that matched the timeline of when Delphine stopped communicating with the outside world. There was Cedric's suspicious phone activity, logging into dating sites while his wife allegedly wandered the streets alone, his device going dark during the exact hours when a body would need to be hidden. There was the testimony of 6-year-old Louis, who heard his parents arguing, who witnessed violence near the Christmas tree, whose innocent words carried the weight of truth that no adult manipulation could manufacture. There was the car parked facing the wrong direction, suggesting someone had used it in a hurry and failed to replicate Delphine's normal parking pattern. There were the threats Cedric had made in the weeks before the disappearance, telling his own mother he would kill Delphine and hide her where she would never be found. And then there were the confessions, the statements made to ex-girlfriends, to fellow prisoners, to anyone who would listen during moments when Cedric Esgard was down and his ego took over. He had compared himself to other killers. He had bragged about committing the perfect crime. He had detailed where he might have hidden the body, dismissing it as a joke when pressed but revealing knowledge that only the killer would possess. Investigators obtained geolocation data from Cedric's phone through Google Records. The data showed a GPS recording that matched a forest area he had visited multiple times before. It could have been a glitch, or it could have been the exact location where Delphine Jubiler's remains lay hidden beneath earth and leaves, waiting to be discovered. Civil parties requested extensive searches of the area, but the prosecutor made a calculated decision: move forward with the trial. The evidence was strong enough. The waiting had gone on long enough. In September 2025, nearly 5 years after Delphine vanished, Cedric Jubiler went on trial at the Tarn Assizes Court in Albi. The trial would last for weeks, a marathon of testimony and evidence that would captivate all of France. Media coverage was intense. Every day, long queues formed outside the courthouse as people desperate to witness justice fought for seats in the gallery. This was more than just a murder trial. It was a referendum on whether circumstantial evidence alone could convict a man of the worst crime imaginable. The courtroom became a theater of raw emotion and legal warfare. Major Bernard Lorvellic took the stand and delivered his assessment with the weight of years of investigation behind him. All the elements collected bring our attention back to Cedric Jubillar. It was a damning statement, but the defense was ready to fight back with everything they had. Cedric's lawyers, led by Emmanuel Frank, attacked the investigation as botched and incomplete. They pointed out that the first responding gendarmes were inexperienced, that notes from the initial hours contained inconsistencies, that the entire foundation of the case was built on assumption rather than proof. They argued that the duvet washing story was fabricated, that the timing of the screams didn't match the timeline, that broken glasses could have happened any number of innocent ways. The defense hammered home one undeniable fact: there was no body, no blood, no weapon, no definitive crime scene. In any normal murder case, these things would exist. The prosecution wanted the jury to believe that Cedric, described as impulsive and unintelligent, had somehow executed a flawless disposal of his wife's remains without leaving a single trace. How does a habitual cannabis user, with no criminal sophistication, pull off what seasoned investigators couldn't unravel? But the prosecution countered with the most powerful weapon in their arsenal: motive and opportunity. Cedric Jubillar had both in abundance. He was a jealous husband facing the end of his marriage. Delphine had cut off his access to money. She was planning to leave. She had confirmed her affair. Every piece of research on intimate partner violence showed that this was the most dangerous moment, the exact time when rage transforms into lethal action. Statistics supported the theory. In France alone, 96 women were killed by partners or ex-partners in 2023. One woman murdered every 3.8 days. Delphine Jubillar had become another statistic in an epidemic of domestic violence. The trial heard raw audio recordings from the early investigation. The court listened to testimony from Cedric's mother, forced to relive the horror of her son's threats. Ex-girlfriends took the stand and recounted the confessions he had made in private moments. Fellow inmates described how Cedric had bragged about his perfect crime, his ego unable to resist claiming credit even as he publicly maintained innocence. The presiding judge engaged in pointed exchanges with Cedric, pressing him on contradictions and suspicious behavior. Why did you log into a dating site an hour after your wife disappeared? Why did your phone go dark during the exact hours when a body would need to be moved? Why did you show no interest in searching for Delphine? Why did you make jokes while her friends desperately tried to find her? Cedric eventually stopped responding, telling the court he had nothing more to say. It was a surrender disguised as defiance, a recognition that any words he spoke would only dig his grave deeper. The prosecution requested the maximum sentence: 30 years imprisonment for aggravated spousal murder. In France, killing your spouse or partner is considered an aggravating factor that can lead to life in prison. The severity of the request reflected both the brutality of the crime and the complete absence of remorse from the accused. The defense made their final arguments, pleading with the jury to resist the temptation of convicting based on emotion rather than evidence. Emmanuel Frank delivered a passionate speech, reminding the court that they do not convict bad characters, they convict the guilty. Yes, Cedric Jubillar was flawed. Yes, he had made terrible choices. Yes, he was a difficult person to like. But being a bad husband, a bad father, a bad person, none of these things equaled being a murderer. Without a body, without physical proof, conviction would be a miscarriage of justice. But the jury wasn't buying it. The bundle of clues had become a rope, and that rope was tightening around Cedric Jubillar's neck. On October 17, 2025, after weeks of testimony and hours of deliberation, the verdict was announced. The assize court, consisting of 3 judges and 6 lay jurors, had reached their decision. At least 7 of the 9 members had voted the same way, the minimum required for a conviction under French law. Cedric Jubillar was found guilty of murdering his wife Delphine. The sentence matched the prosecution's request: 30 years imprisonment. The courtroom erupted. Delphine's family wept with relief and anguish. Justice achieved, but their loved one still missing. Cedric showed little emotion, the same detachment he had displayed throughout the trial, throughout the investigation, throughout the years since his wife vanished. The defense immediately announced their intention to appeal, promising a new trial, likely in 2026. The fight wasn't over. But for the family of Delphine Jubiler, the verdict brought a complicated form of closure. Lawyers, representing her children, made a direct plea to Cedric, begging him to reveal where their mother's remains were hidden, to allow the family to properly mourn and bury her with dignity. That plea has gone unanswered. Cedric maintains his innocence, and with that maintained innocence comes continued silence about what really happened that night and where Delphine's body lies. The case has become emblematic of intimate partner violence in France and around the world. It represents the countless women who live in fear of the men who claim to love them. It shows how danger escalates when victims try to escape, how separation becomes a death sentence for those unlucky enough to be partnered with men who view their wives as property rather than people. The conviction without a body has sparked debate about the French legal system and the standard of intimate conviction. Can justice truly be served when the most crucial piece of evidence remains missing? The jury believed it could. They looked at the bundle of clues, the broken glasses, and the screams, and the threats, and the confessions, and they saw a picture clear enough to erase their doubts. Cedric Jubiler had murdered his wife. The absence of her body didn't change that fundamental truth. But the question that haunts everyone involved remains unanswered. Where is Delphine Jubiler? Is she buried in a forest somewhere, hidden beneath leaves and earth in a location only her killer knows? Is she sealed inside a wall or partition, her husband's profession as a plasterer providing the perfect method of concealment? Is she at the bottom of one of the many mine shafts that dot the region, places so deep and dangerous that searching them all would require resources beyond what any investigation could afford? The truth died with Delphine on that December night, and unless Cedric Jubiler decides to speak, unless his conscience finally overwhelms his ego, that truth will remain buried alongside her remains. 2 young children have grown up without their mother, knowing she was taken from them by their own father, unable to visit her grave because one doesn't exist. It is a cruelty beyond measure, a wound that will never fully heal. Cedric Jubiler sits in a prison cell, serving 30 years for a murder he claims he didn't commit. The appeals process will continue, another trial will likely occur, and the legal battle will stretch on for years. But the verdict has been delivered, the jury has spoken. In the eyes of French justice, Cedric Jubiler is a murderer, and somewhere in the quiet countryside of southern France, Delphine Jubiler's body waits to be found, a final victim of a crime that shocked a nation and left one devastating question forever unanswered. Where is she?